It was a dull, cloudy day in the Hidden Leaf Village, something that seemed to put a hamper on the moods of the villagers living there. Within the newly reconstructed Hokage mansion, 16-year-old Namake's Naruto could be seen sitting over a pile of scrolls within the mansion's library. It had only been a few weeks since the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi War, and things were slowly going back to normal. After the end of the war, Naruto was among the first to be called back to the village from the war front alongside the rest of his group. In that time since he'd been home, he'd once more delved back into his training with an enthusiasm to make Guy and Lee proud. Ninjutsu and Kenjutsu had been at the top of the list, the ninjutsu having been left to him by Jiraiya while the Toads began teaching him Kenjutsu. With all that training under his belt, due mostly to large quantities of Kage Bunshin, he finally felt that he was at the level Jiraiya had been on at his age. Unknown to him, the Toads and Tsunade had opted not to tell him he was actually stronger than Jiraiya was at the time, as it gave him something to work toward. At the moment, however, the blonde was sitting hunched over the ground, carefully drawing characters onto it. Contrary to popular belief, he had learned plenty during his time away training with Jiraiya. However, they had actually spent majority of the time on Fuinjutsu, something Naruto found had fascinated him barely a week into their training. Now the blonde was taking all that training and applying it to the something he'd had the idea for a while back, redesigning his seal. Sure, things in his mindscape seemed different, but it still had the appearance of a sewer, only it no longer had the barred gate as part of its decor. Changing the background of his seal was easier said than done. Despite what he'd done when he'd first taken control of Kurama's chakra, he'd only altered what was already done, swapping out the cage for the torii gates. What he was about to do now, however, would change the very foundations of the seal's makeup, and if he wasn't careful could have disastrous effects. Thankfully, he and the fox were getting along now, so he didn't have to worry about him doing anything reckless that would end up killing them. While he was doing this, he was also rewiring the seal so that it didn't draw so heavily on his chakra. From what he'd been able to tell while he got his advanced healing from his own chakra, it wasn't as powerful as it was supposed to be. He had been thinking for a while and had discovered that most of his yin chakra was going into powering the seal, so his chakra was about 80% yang chakra. By rewriting the seal, he was hoping to even it out a bit more. Hopefully it would help improve his control and maybe even let him use those badass chakra chains his mom had been able to use. Sighing, the blonde ignored the sweat trailing off his face, focused solely on finishing the seal in front of him. For over an hour he had been carefully drawing the characters needed along the floor so that he could finally apply the seals. Finally he got to the last one, and slowly began drawing it, putting the same amount of focus on this one if not more. Yo! Jumping at least 3 feet in surprise, the blonde had no idea he'd actually messed up on the last character, nor did he realize his chakra had spiked in just that instance. Damn it, Kakashi, don't do that! Snarled the blonde with a glare as he tried to catch his breath. For but a second Kakashi froze as Naruto's form was replaced by another man's, glaring just as heatedly. Then just as quickly as it came, it was gone and Naruto was back in his place. Anyway, what are you doing here? Questioned the teen, calming himself and glancing at the man's feet, silently telling him to get off his seal array. Actually, Hokage-sama told me to come get you, said Kakashi with an eye smile. Why, she knows what I'm doing and its importance, said the blonde with a frown. Don't know. I just know she wanted to see every member of the 11. Also, is that supposed to be glowing like that? Asked the masked jounin, motioning to the floor. Glancing down, Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the seal glowing a bright green color. Shit! The muttered word left the blonde just before the room was engulfed in light. As the light cleared, Kakashi's eyes widened, finding Naruto gone, the only sign of his presence being a scorch mark where he'd been sitting on a seal-less floor. Tsunade-sama is not going to like this, muttered the scarecrow, his life flashing before his eyes before visions of his death. When Naruto awoke, it was to the dreary sight of his mindscape. Standing to his feet, the young teen found the water now only reached to the middle of his shins, and not his knees. Regardless of this, he easily made his way through the labyrinth that was his mind, walking on top of the water. Are you awake, Kurama? Questioned the teen as he entered the chamber that held the fox. This is quite the mess we've fallen into, brat, spoke a voice from the darkness of the shadows, a pair of slitted red eyes appearing in the darkness. What happened? Questioned the teen. Slowly a form stepped out of the darkness to that surrounded him. He had seen the kitsune many times, however what he was seeing now threw him for a loop. As its form slowly came into view, Naruto could see that the kitsune was much worse for wear, with patches of fur missing, a bad limp in its left foreleg, and a few of its tails practically half dead by the way they were dragging. Well, as you can no doubt guess, the seal activated when that sorry excuse for a teacher surprised you. However, it didn't work exactly as you intended it to. This was due to a messed up character and an overload of chakra. While it did solidify, it absorbed nearly all of your chakra, doing so before I shot some of mine into you, which it started feeding on. In fact, the damned thing actually took nearly half my power, and I just got it back," exclaimed the fox, causing Naruto to wince. Nearing the end of the war, in a battle with the Jubi, the original Bijou had launched a powerful attack composed mostly of Yin chakra at them. On instinct alone, he had somehow managed to absorb the chakra and direct it into the seal. Of course, having once been a part of the Jubi, the energy had not affected Kurama negatively. In fact, it had actually managed to add to his power and jump-start the regrowth of its own Yin chakra. While he obviously hadn't meant for it to happen, the boost in power had actually helped them more than a little bit during the war. Thankfully, I can already feel my regeneration kicking in and my chakra returning. On the other hand, what the seal took was immediately absorbed into your body. My chakra, however, is composed of yuki, which that seal neglected to purify, so I wouldn't be surprised if you turned into a Hanyu," said Kyubi, causing the boy to sigh. Once upon a time, Naruto would have had a fit if that had been said. However, he had learned after fighting Obito and Madara that he'd already been about 1/8 of a demon since the sealing, much like anyone living now with a Keki Genkai. It was why he healed like he did, since he actually regenerated, if slowly, and the reason he was still alive after losing all that blood for his 4-tailed transformation, much less the 8-tailed one he did when fighting Pain. As such, all being half demon told him now was that he was at the same level of those who first possessed bloodlines. Basically, he may actually be in a position to start his own clan. Also, all that chakra control training went out the window since you have more chakra than before. On the plus side, the seal isn't drawing on your Yin chakra anymore, so you'll be able to get a few more tricks soon enough. That, however, is minor considering the fact that your seal imploded, and we've somehow been flung into a different dimension," finished Kyubi, causing Naruto to blink and stare at him in shock for all of 5 seconds. "Nanny!" Every person within the room winced at the dual screams from Tsunade and Hinata. Kakashi himself was on his toes as he eyed the murderous expression on the Godame's face. At the moment, Tsunade was using all of her restraint to not kill Kakashi at his idiotic move. She had told him quite clearly that Naruto was working on a new seal that he would be applying to the one containing the Kyubi. She had gone further, telling him explicitly not to disturb him until it was completed. "Kakashi, as of this moment you are hereby stripped of your rank and demoted to Chunin. Furthermore, you are banned from ever seeing, touching, or reading another Ika product. Every single one you own will be confiscated and burned, while you will be strictly on D-ranked missions for the next 18 months. Hissed out Tsunade, causing the Jounin to pale. "Tsunade-sama, can't we discuss?" "Enough!" bellowed the woman, slamming her fist into her desk and reducing it to sawdust. "Because of your lack of focus, Konoha may have just lost its strongest shinobi, and I may have to organize a funeral for my son, the one I just had approved as my successor not even 2 hours ago." As these words were spoken, every pair of eyes in the room widened, except for Hinata's, the girl having fainted after her shout. "Not only that, but I have to explain to the Kazekage why his best friend is gone, explain to both the Queen of Spring and Priestess Cheyenne why Naruto won't be around to care for his children. I have to explain to the villagers why their newfound hero, the son of their beloved Yondaime no less, is gone and may not be coming back. I'll also have to tell Hinata that this wasn't a dream, and that Naruto won't be here to propose to her tonight like he had planned to. Finally, I'll have to explain this to his children. I'll have to look into their eyes while I explain to those little girls why they won't get to see their father anymore, and in one why she'll never get to know him, all because one of my Jounin would rather have his nose buried in pornography than listen properly to his Hokage," screamed Tsunade. By now both Sakura and Shizun were holding on to Tsunade for dear life, using the strength technique she taught them to keep her from killing the man. Kakashi himself was as pale as a ghost, and everyone in the room was glaring at him in rage, none more so than Hyuga Niji, who'd become one of Naruto's best friends and was being restrained by both Choji and Lee while Shikamaru was holding him by shadow. At that moment everyone conscious in the room including Kakashi had the same thought. He'd better pray Naruto is still alive. He awoke with a groan with his body racked by a pain far worse than any he had ever experienced before, and for someone who had once had a lightning-covered hand plunged through a lung that said quite a lot. Still he pushed past it, long used to such situations, and instead took the time to analyze his surroundings. He was in a nearly empty room lying within a futon, and with the dampness on his forehead had a washcloth draped across it. Focusing outward with his senses, he could detect a person hidden in the shadows of the upper left and lower right corners of the room. Focusing further out, he could feel several other small, civilian-level chakra signatures, perhaps 50 if his quick counting was correct. Moreover, he could feel one as it moved at an unhurried pace in his direction. Sure enough, moments later the door to the room slid open to admit a young woman with long brown hair that fell down to her mid-back and deep brown eyes. She stood at perhaps 5 feet 8 inches, making her the tallest woman he'd ever met. She moved with a grace that one could see in any high-level kunoichi with not a sound being produced from her footfalls. "Oh, you are awake," said the woman upon leaning down to his level. Naruto frowned. Her words had sounded like gibberish to his ears. He tried to ask her what she said, but his voice was incredibly hoarse, and he stopped speaking after the first word. Still, it proved to be enough for the woman, who spoke up once more. Only now he could understand her. "It is surprising seeing you awake with the amount of damage your body took. We were expecting you to be out a while longer," said the woman. How long?" rasped out the blonde before he was forced to stop speaking once more. "You arrived here 3 days ago, and have been unconscious ever since." "Where?" questioned the blonde. "We are currently in Egypt," stated the woman, not surprised by the confused look on his face. "I figured you would not know where that was. You appeared in a flash of white light, and judging by your condition it was not a voluntary journey," said the woman as she went about replacing the towel on his head with a new one. "Now then, rest. There will be time to speak when you have recovered," said the woman as she stood to her feet. "Wait, who?" questioned the blonde. "I am Talia," stated the woman. "Naruto." "Very well, Naruto-san, please rest for now. We will have much to speak about soon enough," said the woman before leaving the room. As she did, Naruto felt the two shadows in the corner ease up slightly and closed his eyes. Immediately he appeared in the dark world that made up his mindscape, appearing no worse for wear. The place had changed over the years, more specifically after his completion of the seal. First and foremost, the cage which had once held the massive force of nature that was the Kyubi no Kitsune was no longer there. Instead, the fox was seemingly free to wander as he saw fit, though Naruto could lock the place down faster than an akimichi at a buffet. The water that had once covered the floor was now gone as well, having slowly vanished after he first completed the seal during his training at the Falls of Truth. Kyubi, or Kurama as he now knew him to be called, was lying down on his stomach watching him as he approached. Looking the fox over, he could see that it had managed to recover a bit, as one of his tails had come back to life and a few patches of fur had filled in. "Congrats, brat, we survived a jump through time/space," said Kurama, not bothering to change his position. "That's what I was thinking too," said Naruto with a grimace. Despite his studies in Fuinjutsu, time/space techniques were out of his depths. Time/space techniques were considered the holy grail of the ninja arts, and are what made the Nidaime, his father and Obito, so much trouble to deal with. "We'll have to figure out a different way back. That jump nearly killed you even with me actively covering you with a cloak," informed the fox, which Naruto agreed. "When I can, I'll summon Pa and see if we can use the mountain to send me back that way. If not, I'll have to further my Fuinjutsu studies," said the blonde. "That's a start. For now, do as the woman said and rest. We can discuss next steps once we've recovered from the jump." For the next week that's what he did, which, considering his rather high rate of recovery, said quite a lot about just how messed up he was. Talia came around every day to check up on him, and after his third conscious day she had stopped changing the bandages, as those level of injuries had already healed. Even still, despite what she came to do, they would spend time talking, usually until someone came to get her. She told him of what her world was like, the various countries and people in those countries. She told him of things that blew his mind, things that had always seemed like ideas from an overactive imagination. Still, he returned the favor, telling her some of the things about his own world. By the end of the week, his strength had begun to return to him, his muscles being mostly repaired. By that point, he had stopped having guards within the room, and as such had surprised her when she had come in one day to see him doing a small workout of 200 sit-ups. Upon witnessing the feat for the first time, he was allowed to venture out of the room, after of course some clothes were provided for him, which was a simple pair of gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt. The halls were dark, reminding him absently of the corridors that had made up Orochimaru's bases. Eventually she led him to a larger room where a single figure sat, apparently waiting for them. He was a slim figure with a darker tan skin, yet not like those he'd met from Kumo. He had intense green eyes and short black hair that was graying at the sides and exuded an aura of confidence that could rival Hyuga Hayashi himself. He looked to be in his later 40s, perhaps early 50s, and not too far behind him stood a man that stood at a staggering 6 feet 10 inches and looked like a literal wall of muscle. Despite this, however, Naruto could tell he wasn't a threat, and rather easily dismissed him from his mind, doing his best not to laugh at the intimidating stance he stood in. Instead, he took a seat in the empty chair the seated man gestured to at his left, with Talia seating herself across from him, putting her on the man's right. "So you are the one who has captured so much of my daughter's attention, Naruto, correct?" said the man, causing the blonde to nod. "You're younger than I expected," said the man, though Naruto said nothing in an effort to keep the witty retort on his tongue from being said. "My name is Raz al Ghul, Namikaze Naruto," returned the blonde in kind. While this meeting was happening, the members of the now famous Konoha 12, Sai having taken Sasuke's former place, had gathered together within the home of their lost member. Along with them was Katsuyu, who was looking over the seal that had taken a member of their own. At first it had been gone, but it had been quite simple for the slug summoned to bring it back into a visible form. Like most invisible seals, once you channeled chakra into a part of it, the array became visible. Tsunade was at the back, burning a trail through the floor as she paced her section of the room, while Shizen was sitting and watching it all until finally Katsuya sighed and turned away from the seal. "Well, the good news is Naruto-kun shouldn't have died, if my guess is correct," said the slug, immediately causing everyone to release the breath they'd been holding in. "However, I'm not the best at time/space seals. Your best bet is getting one of the toads to check this out, outside of finding a member of the Uzumaki clan," revealed the slug, causing several people to frown. Tsunade herself grimaced at these words. Naruto was currently the only toad summoner on contract, and they couldn't have anyone else sign it because he kept the contract with him at all times now, after someone had tried to steal it after the war. The second option was a tall order, as even though they had the girl Karen in the village, she knew nothing about Fuinjutsu. This meant they would have to look outside of Konoha and for an older member of that clan. They had always theorized that there had been more than a handful of survivors of the clan, however no definitive proof had come in. With that thought in mind, Tsunade realized that the best bet at the moment was indeed to try and get a message to the toads. Thankfully, that may be easier than what others may initially think. She knew that for the last 16 years the toads had been watching over Konoha. Well, truthfully, they had watched over Naruto the first 14, and had only recently taken up a guardianship over the village. Not many people knew it, but for the first few years of his life the toads had kept a strict guard on the boy, so tight that most people still believed Jiraiya had been living in the village at that point. Naruto never realized it, but any time it looked as if things would turn out bad and a mob would form, the toads would spring on the unsuspecting villagers with a vengeance, as soon as the boy himself was out of sight. That was the real reason Naruto, unlike many of his fellow Jinchuriki, had never been on the wrong end of a mob lynching. When Naruto had left on his training trip with Jiraiya, the only way the sage had been able to convince the boy was to leave the Toad clan to watch over the village. "Can you at least tell us what he was trying to do?" questioned Niji after a few moments. "From what I can tell, he was trying to create a link between the real world and his mindscape," said Katsuyu. "That's not possible," said Ino, sitting up and now looking at the seal attentively. "Naruto appears to have found a way. From what I can see here, it was meant to translate everything he sees and create a replication within his mindscape. This means that for each place he traveled, his eyes would record and create a version of it within his mindscape. It would have given him a realistic map of every place he traveled to. Before any more conversation could be had, however, there was a plume of smoke which suddenly erupted, which cleared to show an old green toad. A little over an hour after their initial meeting, the two males stood looking out over the vast desert that spread out around them, the sight reminding Naruto of Kaze no Kuni, though nowhere near as windy. As for their conversation, they had spent much of it sharing the details of their worlds, though Naruto made sure to only give a basic rundown, things that were pretty much common knowledge. The differences between their two worlds were quite noticeable and would require further discussion. Still, the man himself reminded the blonde of Inoki in the way he spoke and saw the world. He was a man who had witnessed and experienced his fair share, and it had left him jaded. The fact that both of them were shinobi gave them a bit of common ground. "Beautiful, isn't it?" questioned the elder man as he beheld the sight. "It is quite the view, but it's not why you brought me up here," remarked the blonde. "True enough. Tell me, what are your plans for the future?" questioned the elder. "I need to figure out a way back home. As you know, my trip here was accidental, and what brought me here was never meant to do so. As such, I'll have to find another means to go back," said the blonde. "Perhaps we can help each other then," stated Roz, catching the teen's attention. "As you told me earlier, your world is occupied by shinobi, whom are the sole super-powered populace, and all of them aligned to a specific country," stated Roz, getting a nod from the blonde. "While my forces do not possess these greater abilities, we are not unlike the traditional ninja of this world, with focuses on stealth, weapons handling, martial arts, and so forth," continued the man. "What are you getting at?" questioned the teen, never one for patience, though he was learning slowly. "For some time now I have been searching for a successor. Someone worthy enough to take control of the League so that I may finally pass on. At one point in time I had considered another, but he is too close-minded and stuck in his world of black and white. Should you agree to become my successor, then the resources of the League shall be at your disposal, and I shall also offer you my daughter's hand. Of course you would have to prove you are up to such a thing," stated the man. Naruto actually had to think on that one. Before all the craziness with the seal happened, he had planned on proposing to Hinata, and as the last known heir of the Uzumaki clan and the sole living heir of the Namikaze clan, it was his responsibility to ensure that the clans thrived. This was done through repopulation, and as such he was allowed a maximum of 4 wives. This was something he saw no need for, but the daimyo had insisted on it, and as such he really had no choice. Sure, he already had 2 daughters whom he loved dearly, but his eldest was now Spring Country's princess, and his youngest daughter would be taking over for Cheyenne as High Priestess of Oni no Kuni. "Take the offer, brat." "You sure about this, Kurama?" questioned the blonde. "From what I can tell, the man has been around for well over 100 years. It is long past his time to end. Furthermore, he is offering to let you take his forces back with you to Konoha, and your forces could use the boost," explained the fox. Naruto could agree on that point. During the war, all of the villages had been hit hard, but considering all the damage that had befallen Konoha since the combined sound/sand invasion, the Leaf had never really had time to recover. The war itself had nearly decimated their forces, and just from what he had seen walking around, the forces he was offering could really help the village now, even without having any training in chakra usage. "I'm blaming you if Bachan gets mad," stated the blonde. "Good thing I'm safely locked in here then," retorted the fox, and Naruto could just picture the grin across his muzzle before he focused himself back on the outside world. "I suppose I can take you up on your offer. At the very least I can get back into shape and get some decent training time in," stated the teen. "Very well, I will send someone to collect you in an hour. Talia will lead you back to your quarters," said the man before he turned and walked back into the base. As the blonde turned, he was surprised to find that Talia was indeed standing behind them, and quickly fell in step with her as she turned to walk away. "Are you okay with all of this?" questioned the blonde. "It is my duty to lead the League. My father, however, would rather I do not do it alone. It is because of this he keeps reviving himself. Perhaps he believes that if I were by your side he could then rest without worry. From my own understanding I can guess that things would be much easier for us in your world. While not possessing many of our technological advancements, the state of your world from your descriptions is much better than the state this world is in." The rest of the walk was made in silence, with the blonde using the time to think over her words. Finally they arrived to his quarters, and after seeing him inside, Talia made her own exit. Taking a look around the room, Naruto was pleased to find there was no one present, made quick work of biting his right thumb before flashing through a familiar chain of seals. As he slammed his hand to the ground, there was the customary plume of smoke which cleared to show Fukasaku, "Naruboy, you're alive." Within a large, darkened room, a pair of figures could be seen in the center as they clashed. The first was young at 16 years of age. He stood at 5 feet 7 inches and wore an outfit that consisted of a pair of black pants and a sleeveless black t-shirt. His hair was a golden blonde color that fell down to the nape of his neck, and he had the most brilliant blue eyes many would ever see. His opponent was a woman who stood at 5 feet 8 inches. She had long black hair that fell down to her midsection and a pair of deep brown eyes. She wore a pair of tight black pants and a long-sleeved black shirt that did nothing to conceal her figure. Their engagement was forcibly broken as the blonde found himself thrown away from the woman, only for him to recover, twisting himself into a corkscrew and managing to land on his feet, though he slid back nearly 2 feet upon landing. Shooting his opponent a challenging grin, he rushed right back at her, determination filling his eyes as he closed the distance. As the teen rushed her, the woman couldn't help but return his grin with a smirk of her own. As he appeared before her, the blonde let loose a flurry of punches which the woman gracefully dodged around, knowing better than to try and block a punch from him. Still, she was enjoying herself. While initially not a challenge to her in terms of skill, the teen had grown in terms of ability rapidly until the point where he was actually a challenge. For his part, Naruto was really enjoying himself. He was in his element, engaging in combat with someone just for the pure enjoyment of it. No saving of the world pressure, and no threat of dying. This was just a pure challenge of ability to determine an answer to a question that all real fighters came to once they met: who's better? Granted, his opponent had a lot more in the way of pure technical skill, but Naruto was not only stronger but several times faster as well. Watching the two from a walkway above them, just like the one that could be found in Konoha's Forest of Death, a group of people stood by watching the fight take place. At the head of the group stood Raz Al Ghul himself, and to his left stood his daughter Talia. Beside her stood another man who was given the title of Master Archer, and was known simply as Merlin. He stood at a height of 6 feet 3 inches and wore a similar black clothing as the rest of the group, only his had a hood which was currently down, overshadowing his features. To Ra's right stood his other daughter Nissa. She stood at 5 feet 9 inches with long black hair that fell down to the middle of her back and had deep brown eyes. "I don't believe it, in just a few months he's able to push Lady Shiva this far," stated Nissa. "Agreed. In fact, if I wasn't seeing it myself, I would not believe it," stated Merlin. Indeed, when he first came here, his hand-to-hand skills left much to be desired. Despite this, however, he was still strong and fast enough to outclass everyone here. It is only because he is holding back those physical advantages that he has been able to learn so well and can now match her this well on a technical standpoint, stated Raz. For her part, on the ground, the woman known as Lady Shiva couldn't help but be impressed with the blonde, and that was not something easily done. At an early age she had dedicated her life to the study of martial arts, and has since become known as one of the world's greatest martial artists, if not the best of them. When Raz Al Ghul himself had requested that she take the young man she was currently facing on as a student, she had been rather reluctant, but had agreed after the blonde had given a demonstration of his ability. Back then he'd had speed and strength. What he had lacked was technique, which is something her time training him had given the teen. In fact, she found that he was the perfect student, he training hard, and his never-ending determination was admirable. Not only that, but she found a kindred spirit in him. Not only was he an orphan, but he found his purpose in combat, and he had no problems admitting he liked the feeling of matching his fists to another's. In the 6 months since she had taken to training him, he had progressed at a phenomenal rate. He learned everything she threw his way, and not only did he learn it, he came up with interesting new ways to put those moves to work. In fact, he was such a great student she often found herself disappointed when their time together came to a close for the day. While most only knew that Raz was considering him as a successor, she had already been informed by the man himself that the choice was already made. He had gone even further and told her a bit about the boy's past, though revealed that even he did not know much, but the knowledge that the blonde was an actual ninja said enough for the man's reasoning. Naruto, however, wasn't the only one learning things though. In fact, she had learned several new tricks from the blonde to add to her repertoire. While she had added technique and structure to his style, she had learned that he was naturally free-flowing, and because of this he had several moves that he kept in reserve. With the way he usually carried himself, you wouldn't think he was so athletic, but he had shown her some things that she'd only ever seen in movies. As if to prove her point, he suddenly leapt, avoiding the low roundhouse kick she threw, turning himself into a corkscrew, and coming down with a kick that landed flush with the left side of her face. As Naruto landed onto his feet, Shiva hit the ground and tumbled before coming to a stop, only to look up to see him grinning at her. 5-5. Looks like things are all even, sensei, remarked the blonde. Indeed, it seems today's contest is a draw, remarked the woman. Naruto, freshen up. Once done, meet me in my study, called Roz, catching the attention of the duo on the floor. Turning up to face him, Naruto merely nodded before turning to his sensei and giving her one more cheeky grin before leaving the room. Once she was sure he was gone, Shiva's hand almost immediately flew to her jaw as her neutral mask shattered and the pain of the kick finally showed on her face. I'm having his baby, was the only thought going through her mind. If there was one thing she desired, it was a strong, significant other to give her stronger kids. Back in Konoha, within the compound of the Hyuga clan, Hyuga Hinata sat quietly behind her desk in the clan head's office. Her situation was a unique one. Not only was she one of the few females to ever lead her clan, but she was the youngest clan head ever. The fact was that the clan heads usually lived longer lives, as they rarely left the safety of the compound. But her father Hayashi had fought on the front lines during the Fourth Shinobi War, and in an act showing that he truly cared for his daughter had sacrificed himself, saving both Hinata and Niji when they had been attacked by Obito. His wounds had been too numerous to count, and they were only thankful in that he had died quickly. Because of this, she had become clan head effective immediately. During the war, she, like her father, had led her clan on the front lines and had eventually become known as one of the heroes of the Fourth Shinobi War. After the war's end, she had been among the first to be recalled to Konoha, and her first official act had been to set things right within her clan. She had abolished the separation of houses and declared the caged bird seal forbidden, and its application punishable by death. The elders had not been happy, nor had many of the more stuck-up main house members, but her word was law, and as such not only was it forbidden, but she'd even gone so far as to order the commission of a new seal be made to replace the caged bird seal, one that all clan members would wear. Leaning back in her chair, she removed the end of a simple cord necklace from within the inside of her blouse. Dangling upon it was a ring with a large kunzite stone set into the center. It was the engagement ring Naruto had gotten her. Tsunade had given it to her 2 days ago after she had recovered from her fainting spell. This time she didn't faint. Instead, she had cried at the knowledge that her dream had been so close to coming true, only to be snatched away from her cruelly due to Kakashi and his obsession with porn. Her thoughts on the matter were broken as her door was opened, catching her attention. Looking up, she spotted her sister Hanabi as she made her way inside, sliding the door closed behind her. No words were spoken. Instead, the younger girl quietly made her way behind the desk and was soon sitting in her sister's lap, Hinata holding her while she cried. She didn't blame the younger girl. Despite the fact that she had only known Naruto for a few weeks, the two of them had bonded rather quickly. Not only that, but with the death of their father, and so many others of their clan still so fresh, she wasn't surprised that it had become too much for the girl. Despite what most people believed about her, Hanabi was a very sweet girl, and though she hid it better than Hinata had ever been able to, she was a kind person and did not like for other people to get hurt. As she held her sister, she lost the battle she had been fighting herself, and once more her own tears began to come down. Elsewhere within the village, Tsunade walked through a darkened corridor within a lower layer of the administrative offices. After the war, Sai had led a team through all of the hidden bunkers that Danzo had created for his forces. The one beneath the administrative office, and consequently the Jounin standby station, academy, and of course her office, Tsunade had converted into a prison. Most that were kept here were political prisoners who could be used as bargaining tools against the other villages if it ever came to such a thing. Despite the success of the Fourth Shinobi War, and the peace it had brought about, all of the Kages had known that it could not last, and the alliance had dissolved almost immediately after the war's end. Despite this, no one was expecting any problems. all of the great villages and even the samurai-run Tetsu no Kuni had suffered heavy losses during the war. Even for as short as that one had been, it had been the bloodiest in history. Tsunade-sama, your presence here is surprising. The voice that had spoken with its cool tone belonged to the sole occupant housed within the prison, Uchiha Sasuke. Despite the role he played during the war, he had still been imprisoned immediately after. Many of the civilians had wanted to raise a fuss, however no one could refute the fact that the Uchiha heir had willingly deserted the village, something that would usually cost someone their life. Sasuke, however, was getting off easy in that he was only serving a few years in prison due to the fact that he had turned himself in following the war and had complied with his sentencing without a fuss. The fact was, most of the shinobi knew that if the Uchiha had wanted to, he could free himself at any time. Such was his ability even without his chakra, which they had sealed off. The Uchiha himself seemed to present the picture of nobility even behind the bars and in the prison-issued clothing. His hair had lengthened a bit, but nothing major, as he had not been held there long enough for any massive changes in appearance. The only true difference she had come to learn of was that he was a bit more talkative with a select few people, mostly the members of his genin team, all of whom usually stopped by to see him at least a few times a week. As it was, he was currently in a meditative pose, his eyes still closed. Would I be correct in assuming your presence here has something to do with whatever trouble the Dobe has managed to get himself into now? Questioned Sasuke. What makes you believe Naruto's in any trouble? Questioned Tsunade, wondering if Sakura had not been able to keep her mouth shut the last time she had come down. I'm guessing he hasn't told you of the depth of our connection. I can always feel his presence in the back of my mind. Even without my chakra, he cannot hide himself from my senses. I'm sure the same can be said on his end. 2 days ago, however, his presence simply vanished from my senses completely. The only thing I do know for certain is that he is not dead," stated the Uchiha. Tsunade had to admit she was impressed. Everyone knew that there was something different about the two of them. After all, near the end of the war, it had been Naruto and Sasuke that had stood against the master manipulator that was Uchiha Madara, and been able to match him skill for skill. She had asked Naruto once, and he'd simply smiled at her, and said she should have expected as much from his brother. Someone had tried asking Sasuke once as well, and he had simply stared at them until they'd gotten bored and moved on. Sasuke was usually cooperative, but whenever the subject touched on certain things, he would clam up. Sighing, she decided that perhaps her instinct of coming down here was right after all, and sure that they were alone after pulsing her chakra, she spoke. 2 days ago, Naruto was working on a new seal that he would be applying to the seal holding in the kyubi. While he was doing this, Kakashi surprised him, resulting in the seal activating prematurely. Due to his surprise, one of the seal's characters had messed up, and it became a time/space seal. As of now, we're not sure of his current status. As the words were stated, Sasuke suddenly froze before he slowly looked up at her. For just a moment, as their eyes met, Tsunade could imagine the Uchiha's eyes at their height of power, one the Manjikyu Sharingan and the other a scarlet version of the Rinnegan. Slowly he lifted his left hand palm upwards as a dark crescent moon marking appeared on his palm, his eyes focused upon the marking. Finally, after several long moments, the marking faded and he relaxed and his eyes closed once more. "He's fine, however he's been flung into a different dimension," stated Sasuke, causing Tsunade to raise an eyebrow. "And how would you know this?" questioned Tsunade. "Within the Naka Shrine, in the Uchiha district, you will find a secret entrance under the 7th mat to the far right. There you will find the answers to your questions," stated Sasuke. Once he was sure that the woman was gone, he delved back into his meditation. As he did, he found himself in a white void where a single figure stood. "A different dimension?" questioned the Uchiha heir as he regarded the older man. "There are many dimensions throughout creation. For now, put it out of your mind. We shall meet up with Azura soon enough. For now, let us continue your study of Nishu." After a quick shower, Naruto found himself wandering the halls that made up their current place of residence. They had long since left Egypt and had settled into their main base of operations, Nanda Parbat, which was hidden in the mountains of Tibet. Over the few months he'd been there, he had learned much. He had gained not just a cleaner taijutsu, but he'd learned to wield several more weapons. His favorite had become the Kaiketsu Shogyai, which was quite similar to the Kusarigama that he had seen Tenten wield. The difference, however, instead of a sickle at the head there was a knife, and instead of the weighted end it has a simple ring. He had always thought weapons were cool, but Jiraiya wasn't a weapons specialist and didn't use any outside of standard shuriken and kunai, and even that had been rare. His usage of the chain weapon had come because he thought his mom's chakra chains were cool, and this was the closest he'd managed to get so far. There was also the fact he'd seen the weapon used in a movie and thought it was badass. He'd also learned how to use twin swords during his training. His reasoning had been simple: if Sasuke uses one, he'll be able to use two. Other than that, he had been focusing mostly on Fuinjutsu, which he spent the vast majority of his time on. Breaking himself from his thoughts, he found himself standing before the entrance to Ra's study. He didn't bother to knock and simply opened the door to enter the room, which was understandable considering that the study was actually a freaking library. If he knocked, the man probably wouldn't have even heard it, depending on how deep within it he was. As he neared the center of the library, he suddenly stopped and looked over his right shoulder to find Raz standing behind him. "You're getting better," noted the master assassin as he moved over to a desk. "You asked to see me?" stated Naruto, getting straight to the point, something Raz appreciated as it meant the young man was in the correct mindset. I have a mission I would like you to perform." Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. In the entire time that he'd been in this dimension, he had never been far from the man's reach. Of course, this was understandable, as he had been ignorant of many of the differences between this and his own home. Not only that, but Naruto had been in training mode, and Raz had seen that when the boy was focused on something it was hard to break him away from it. Now, however, he found that the teen had reached an adequate level of ability. If he was able to handle a spar with Shiva and come out no worse for wear, well, it's about time. As much as I like training, I need to get out every once in a while, stated the blonde, already anticipating the time ahead. "Well, this one should do well for you," said Raz as he handed the teen a folder from atop the desk. As he read over the specs, Naruto felt a feeling that he hadn't felt in years come over him. Before he had become a ninja, there had been one thing he had excelled at that not even the meanest of his academy instructors could refute: he was a natural at infiltration. As a kid, he had put that skill to the test by infiltrating and leaving little gifts in the various clan compounds. His single greatest accomplishment in the field to date had been breaking into the Hokage's office and making off with the forbidden scroll of seals. The fact of the matter was that he hadn't ever had any missions that called for infiltration while he was operating as a shinobi of Konoha. He was a tank, and he was generally assigned to high-profile missions that would put that fact to use. Seeing the smirk that graced his student's place pleased the master assassin, as while he wasn't saying anything, he was using this mission as an opportunity to rate the teen's progression in the things that the League puts its pride into: stealth, infiltration, and espionage. "Prepare your gear, you leave in an hour," stated Raz, getting a nod from the teen, who went to do as told. While Naruto was preparing to head out for his mission, Fukusaku was already well into his own. Due to the situation of his clan's summoner, he had found himself in a rather peculiar situation as he went about trying to find a means to fix things. The problem was, despite his age, and what others believed, he was not all that good at Fuinjutsu. Sure, he knew a lot about the subject, but most of it was things he had gleaned from Minato, and to a lesser extent Jiraiya. It was because of this he was traveling through an area well outside his clan's home of Mt. Myobokuzan and into territory belonging to another clan. He was currently deep into a forest area that would make the forest surrounding Konoha seem as if it was a small park in comparison. Suddenly the elder sage stopped in his movement, and without turning into any particular direction spoke out. "I apologize for the intrusion, however I have come to speak to your clan's leaders," called the old toad. For several moments nothing happened until out of the foliage emerged three creatures, two of which he could tell were mere children, while the adult of the group stared at him dead in the eyes. "It has been a long time since someone has ventured this deep into our territory. I welcome you to my home, Fukusaku-sama, elder sage of the Toad clan." The voice that spoke was female and powerful, and Fukusaku bowed in gratitude as he recognized the head of this particular clan of summoned creatures. Nearly a full 15 minutes later found the elder toad within a forest clearing near a beautiful lake with crystal clear waters, joined by not only the first but several other adult summons of this particular species. Despite the fact that he was surrounded, and he was not only outnumbered but outsized, the toad sage held no fear of these creatures. While true the Toads had gained quite a bit of notoriety in recent years thanks to their last 3 summoners, the Elder Toad was now in the presence of one clan that held much more notoriety and status in the realm of summons. In fact, that held so much sway that they one of the 4 clans to sit on the Council of Summons, the rulers of all summoned creatures. Aside from that, the Toads had a rather particular history with this clan, so despite their well-earned reputation he knew he was safe here. Now that we are all here, perhaps you can explain why you have sought us out, stated the creature he'd first initially met. Very well, but first, are you aware of what has transpired in the human realm in the last stretch of time? Questioned Fukusaku. No. We have chosen to live in solitude after our failure, stated one of the creatures, getting a nod from Fukusaku. Very well, then the first thing you should be aware of is that the Child of Prophecy has completed his role, stated the Toad, getting surprised looks from those surrounding him. Is that so, and what was the outcome? Questioned one of the elders, a deep male voice speaking out. He has saved the world and peace has begun. Only just recently, I'd say about 1 month ago, stated Fukusaku. While that is indeed good news you've brought us, I believe it is not the reason you are here, stated another elder, this one also female. Indeed, my reason deals with the Child of Prophecy, who is my clan's current contract holder. A few days ago he was working on a seal he planned to apply to himself. An old Jounin instructor interrupted him while he was working. In his surprise the seal activated, but it did not do what it should have. Instead, it has transported him into a different dimension, explained Fukusaku. I see, and I take it you are here to request our aid in studying this seal and bringing him back, stated one of the elders. Not just that, but as his 16th birthday has just recently passed, he now qualifies to sign the contract belonging to his mother's clan. Your contract, explained the Toad, surprising all of them. Your summoner, who is he? Questioned one of the elders. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. He is the son of Uzumaki Kushina and my clan's last contract holder Namikaze Minato. You knew when Uzumaki heir lived, and you did not come to us sooner, roared one of creatures, its eyes flashing in anger. At this, Fukusaku seemed to age before their eyes, if that was even possible, giving them all pause. The elder himself took in a deep breath and released it slowly, knowing this part was the most important, as if there was one thing the Uzumaki clan shared with their summons, it was their volatile tempers. In truth, we did not learn who he was until recently. Even he did not know who his parents were until a few months back. From what I understand, the Sandaime Hokage made the knowledge of his heritage an S-class secret that was not to be explained to him until his 15th birthday. The problem was that the man died when the boy was 12. His godfather was also responsible for telling him, but he also passed away recently, just a few months prior, and had never been able to tell him. It was Naruto who told me. Trust me, we were just as angry when we learned the entire truth. We were simply asked to watch over him in his childhood, as the Kyuubi had been sealed inside him, explained the elder Toad. Very well, we shall decipher this seal and you will have him sign our contract. He will be a dual summoner, stated the eldest of the creatures, getting a nod from the Toad. There is one last thing. While peace has come at this point, it is fragile, and while Naruto is indisposed, he will need to be ensured of something in order to get him to focus completely. He has 2 daughters, one living in Yuki no Kuni and one in Oni no Kuni, either of which has even seen their 2nd year of age. Normally we would see to their protection, but due to their locations, stated the Toad sage, trailing off. Understandably, you Toads, while extremely versatile, would stand out too much in those areas. We will ensure the protection of his children, stated the clan head. Fukusaku was grateful for that, and happy this meeting had gone as well as it had. Not only would the seal be figured out, but he had given Naruto something else to connect him with his mother aside from the fox, and this was something that would ensure the protection of his children. After all, there were few more territorial, protective, or as fierce as those of the Tiger clan. Unknowing of this meeting in the dimension he currently found himself in, Naruto was in the middle of his own mission. It had taken him several hours to arrive, and after a night of surveillance he was all set to get things underway. A quick henge had transformed him into a man in his late 30s, one he'd actually taken some time to study and was now replacing. Now in disguise he made his way through the entry doors of the 2-story building, nodding to the 2 security guards sitting at the booth as he passed. Turning a corner once past them, he made his way through a long corridor, and into an elevator at the end of the corridor which hid the building's true purpose. While on the surface the building was only 2 stories tall, it actually held 52 sublevels beneath it, which is why it held an express elevator. Stopping at sublevel 15, he made his way into a room, cutting on the light to the empty room and closing the door behind him. While his current disguise had complete access to the entire building, he stopped on 15 as that was where he learned the man's office was. During the last few months with the League, he had spent some time learning how to use the technology of this world, and while he was no expert, he didn't need to be with this system. Scrolling through all of the sublevels and their activities, he found himself stopping on level 33 due to intrigue. Because this was the level that apparently kept the archives of all weapon projects, whether they were active or abandoned. As he scrolled this level, he found himself underwhelmed, as nothing they were working on as far as weapons were very interesting. Looking through the abandoned ideas he found out of curiosity, he found himself pausing though as he came across one particular project. Now this is interesting, thought the disguised blonde as he looked it over. Removing a case from his pouch, he opened it, revealing several flash drives inside it. The one he withdrew was orange, and he quickly plugged it in, copying all the information pertaining to this particular subject to the drive, and after verifying everything was there, deleting it from the original source. As he looked further into the files, he found another little thing that piqued his interest, and decided to copy that one as well, making sure to delete it from the original source as well. Removing the drive, he placed it back into the case before removing another drive and beginning the task of copying all of the files to the new drive. While the archive was being downloaded to the drive, he moved and started checking over the active projects. Looking through the various folders, he found a few that caught his attention as they were scheduled to be started soon. Though one had already been active, on a whim he decided to make a few adjustments for a few of the projects, moving up the timetable for one and making a few changes for another. Thankfully, he was using the facility head's passcodes, and as such the fool would think he was the one to do so. Looking back over, he was just in time to see that the archive had finished copying itself into the flash drive. Removing that drive, he replaced it with another, and as such loaded it to make a copy of all ongoing and future projects that were set to being in the next few months. Once the contents had finished copying itself, he removed the drive and quickly logged out of the system. Once done, he quickly exited the room, closing and locking the door behind him. Walking hurriedly, he made it to the elevator and took it back up to the main floor. Once on the main floor, he walked with a hurried purpose towards the front doors, and as he thought was stopped by security. "Heading out early today, Dr. Desmond?" questioned the guard as he approached them. "No, I seem to have left my wallet in the car. I'll be back in a few minutes," stated the henge shinobi, getting an understanding nod from the guard before he proceeded out. As he made his way out of the doors, he had to fight to keep himself frowning. The majority of what he had seen would have not surprised him if it had been found in one of Orochimaru's bases. The snake bastard, as much as he hated to admit it, however, had at least had a purpose for the horrors he committed, even if the logic had been twisted to fit his depraved mind. What he saw in there, however, was for no purpose other than fear. That fear, while justifiable in itself, had resulted in actions that were unthinkable. He was only thankful that he had been sent to get the ball rolling on putting an end to this madness, and he knew just how to do it. Putting those thoughts to the back of his mind for the time being, as he reached the parking garage that was just next door, he made his way to a gray Toyota Corolla. Moving over to the passenger side door, he took a quick scan before ducking inside. Once he was in and the door had closed behind him, the driver's seat shimmered momentarily before the person he was currently impersonating appeared in the seat. Looking down at his watch to check the time, he quickly slapped the back of the man's head, pushing a little chakra into it as well. Immediately the man jerked awake, only for his eyes to glaze over once he and Naruto looked eyes. "You've been in the office for 2 hours reviewing and editing files. You went out to get a cup of coffee and realized you did not have your wallet, which is in the center compartment here. You will wait 45 seconds before retrieving your wallet and heading back inside to continue your day. You will not remember me presence here." With that said, Naruto's image shimmered before he resumed his natural form, only now instead of wearing slacks, a dress shirt, and a lab coat, he wore a pair of black jeans and a blue hooded sweater. Leaving the car, he turned out of the parking garage and disappeared into the foot traffic, walking the streets. Just over half a minute later, the man jolted back into wakefulness, and looking through the center compartment found his wallet before climbing out of the car. The next night found Naruto crouched on the ledge of a building's rooftop as he looked out at his surroundings. In the time that had passed he had put plenty of distance between himself and the city that had been the target of his mission. In truth, if one knew what they were doing, it was actually easier for someone to disappear in this dimension. Sure, the multiple cameras and other gadgets made it a bit difficult, but he had figured out a way around that problem easy enough. Getting distance from his infiltration site had also been easy, as he had followed the foot traffic several blocks and entered into the bus station, and proceeded to buy a one-way ticket which brought him to his current location. At the moment he was still dressed in his street clothes, only his hood was pulled over his head. He also had a bandana wrapped around the top of his head, beneath it covering his hair, and a half-mask much like Kakashi's covered the bottom portion of his face from view. "You can stop trying to hide now, I know you're there," stated the blonde without even moving his gaze from the view. For several long moments nothing happened before a figure stepped out of the darkness. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" demanded the figure, the tone of voice giving away that it was a man. "Now that would be telling, and you haven't earned the right to know my name at this point. However, I am known as Heir to the Demon," stated the blonde, still not bothering to turn so didn't see the figure's eyes narrow. "As for why I am here, well, it should be obvious. I came to meet with you." As he said this he tossed something back over his shoulder which the figure instinctively caught, and after a brief glance realized it was a flash drive. "What game are you playing at?" demanded the figure. "This is no game. Raz speaks highly of you, however I like to make my own assessments. Prove to me you're as good as he thinks you are, and then the real work will begin. And trust me, this is an offer you cannot afford to pass on," said the teen. "And why should I trust anything from a member of the League of Assassins?" said the man. "League of Shadows now, that name fits better. As far as how you can trust my info, I pulled that straight from the source. Also, do not forget you yourself are a member of the League. It was we who took you in and trained you. What you do with those skills is entirely up to you. As for how you can trust my intel, I pulled that straight from the source. I trust you'll verify what I've given you. Aside from that, in the future I may need to call in a favor from your Justice League. Look at this as me building some goodwill," said the blonde. "And Raz is just letting you hand me this information?" questioned the man in suspicion. "Raz is an old man, and to be honest he should have passed on ages ago. In his old age he had become bitter, and that bitterness influenced his decisions. He and I have spoken several times about this at length, and he has seen his past errors. Something you could have showed him if you weren't stuck in your world of black and white. If you don't wish that same future upon yourself, I advise you to take your head out of your ass. Ms. Kyle will not wait for you forever. I'll be watching, detective." With that his form was obscured by swirling leaves and he vanished. As he did so, the figure left behind, known to the world at large as Batman, narrowed his eyes before he too vanished, only he did so by disappearing into the darkness surrounding him.